The last resort, the final fortress commander Vex Jakari stood in the observation dome of Bastion Prime, watching the stars disappear one by one. Each vanishing light represented another solar system consumed by the void harvest. Another billion lives snuffed out in an instant. The Jakari Empire had once ruled 3 galaxies, their crystal ships carrying trade and culture across millions of worlds. Now, their entire civilization was reduced to this single fortress world, hidden in a pocket of twisted space-time. Commander, the outer sensor grid is detecting movement, reported Lieutenant Kale from the tactical station. His voice carried the exhaustion they all felt after 3 years of constant retreat. It's them. The Eternal Ones are moving toward the Meridian system. Vex's forearms tightened around the railing. The Meridian system housed the last refugee fleet from the Altarian Collective. Nearly 50 million souls crammed into generation ships that were never meant for permanent habitation. They had perhaps 6 hours before the Eternal Ones reached them. How many? Vex asked, though he already knew the answer would be meaningless. Numbers meant nothing when facing beings that existed beyond the normal laws of physics. 17. Harvest vessels, each the size of a moon, Kale replied. They're moving in formation, just like they did at Corinth Prime. Vex closed his eyes, remembering Corinth Prime, the most heavily defended world in the known galaxy, protected by quantum shields that could withstand the explosion of a star. The Eternal Ones had simply reached through the shields as if they were made of paper, and the entire planet had been drained of all life in less than an hour. Not destroyed, just emptied. The world still existed, but it was now a perfect sphere of grey dust, every living thing converted into energy to fuel their endless hunger, the forbidden archives. Kira Solthan burst into the command center, her usually pristine laboratory coat stained with chemical burns and exhaustion. She carried a data crystal that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Vex, I found something. In the Forbidden Archives. In the section marked Never Open. The Forbidden Archives were the collective repository of knowledge from thousands of dead civilizations. Each species that faced extinction had sent their most dangerous secrets there, hoping that future generations would be wiser. The section marked Never Open contained information deemed too dangerous for any species to possess. What did you find? Vex asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Records from the first expansion, over 3,000 years ago. The Eternal Ones have been here before, Vex. They consumed nearly 90% of the universe back then, just like they're doing now. Kira's hands shook as she inserted the crystal into the central display, but something stopped them. Something made them retreat to the edge of reality and stay there for millennia. The holographic display flickered to life, showing star charts that were almost incomprehensible. The galaxy clusters were arranged differently. Space itself seemed younger. Somehow, ancient text scrolled across the screen in languages that predated modern civilization. The records are fragmented, Kira continued, but they all point to the same thing. A species from a small blue world in what we now call the Sol System. They called themselves humans, and somehow they made the Eternal Ones afraid. Vex studied the data, his tactical mind racing. What kind of weapons did they use? Dimensional disruptors, quantum cascade bombs. That's just it, Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. According to these records, they didn't use weapons at all. At least, not in any way we understand. The texts keep referring to something called the Final Protocol and mentions of humans, becoming something the Eternal Ones couldn't comprehend. The desperate gambit the senior staff gathered in the war room, their faces grim. The holographic tactical display showed the inexorable advance of the Eternal Ones across the galaxy. Red zones marked the areas already consumed, while the few remaining green zones grew smaller by the hour. "We have to try," Vex said, his voice cutting through the murmur of despair. "Every other option has failed. Our most advanced weapons are useless against them. Our shields might as well be made of paper. If there's even a chance that these humans still exist." "Sir," interrupted Chief Engineer Drac, his massive frame hunched over his datapad. "The Sol system has been quarantined for 3 millennia. Every probe sent there has been destroyed or simply vanished. The entire sector is surrounded by warning beacons in dead languages that all say the same thing. Do not approach, do not attempt contact. For your own survival, forget this place exists." "The warnings weren't placed by the humans," Kira added. "They were placed by the survivors of the last harvest. Every species that escaped the Eternal Ones 3,000 years ago contributed to that quarantine. They were terrified of what the humans had become." Vex stood silent for a long moment, weighing the decision that would determine the fate of all remaining life in the universe. Through the viewport, he could see the last few stars flickering as the Void Harvest continued its work. Soon, there would be nothing left but darkness. "Prepare the quantum transmitter," he ordered. "We're going to break every law and treaty in the galaxy. We're going to contact the humans." The signal, the quantum transmitter, was a massive device that filled an entire deck of Bastion Prime. It could send messages across galactic distances instantly, but using it required enormous amounts of energy and would reveal their location to anyone listening. Under normal circumstances, activating it would be suicide. "Transmitter is ready, Commander," reported the communications officer. "But sir, we don't know their language, their protocols, or even if they still exist." Vex stepped up to the transmission console. "Send this message on all frequencies, in every language we know. Include the mathematical constants and the location of the Eternal One's fleet. If they're still out there, if they're still watching, they'll understand." The message was simple. "We are the last. The Eternal Ones have returned. We need your help. Please respond." The transmitter hummed to life, channeling power from the fortress's main reactor. The message burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the desperate hope of trillions of beings. Then they waited. For 6 hours, there was nothing. The Eternal Ones continued their advance, and the last refugee fleet prepared for extinction. Then, just as the harvest vessels entered the outer edge of the Meridian system, a single response came back. "Message received. Help is coming. Maintain position. Do not engage." The arrival of the ship that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was sleek and organic-looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. Its holes seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and it radiated an energy signature that didn't match any known technology. Most disturbing of all, it appeared to be partially phased out of normal space-time, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Vex Jakari of the Jakari Empire," Vex transmitted. "Are you human? This is Captain Sarah Chan of the United Earth ship Defiance," came the reply. The voice was calm, almost eerily so. "We received your transmission. We're here to help." "Captain, you don't understand," Vex said urgently. "The Eternal Ones have 17 harvest vessels. They're moving toward the refugee fleet. Your ship." no matter how advanced, cannot possibly stand against them. There was a pause before Captain Chen responded. Commander, 3,000 years ago, your ancestors and mine faced the same threat. We made a promise then that we would never let this happen again. We've spent 3 millennia preparing for this moment. On the tactical display, the Eternal One's fleet was approaching the refugee ships. The massive harvest vessels began to glow with the energy buildup that preceded their feeding. In minutes, 50 million beings would be converted to energy and absorbed. Captain, they're about to attack, Vex warned. I know, came the calm reply. Activating final protocol now. The final protocol, the human ship began to change. Its hull rippled and expanded, not growing larger, but somehow becoming more present, as if it were claiming more space in reality itself. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the Jakari sensors could measure. Captain, what are you doing? Vex demanded. We're doing what we've always done, Sarah Chen replied. We're adapting. The Defiance suddenly wasn't just one ship. It was hundreds, then thousands, each one slightly out of phase with the others. They weren't duplicates, but possibilities, potential versions of the same vessel existing simultaneously. The effect was hypnotic and terrifying. Commander Kira whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. They're not using technology. They're using consciousness itself as a weapon. They've learned to manipulate probability, to exist in multiple states at once. The Eternal One's fleet stopped their approach. For the first time in recorded history, the beings that had consumed galaxies hesitated. Their perfect formation wavered, as they encountered something they couldn't understand or absorb. Eternal Ones, Captain Chen's voice broadcast across all frequencies. We meet again. I believe you remember what happened last time you tried to consume our universe. The response came not in words, but in a wave of pure malevolence that washed across space. The Eternal Ones were not just hungry. They were ancient beyond measure, and they remembered the small blue world that had somehow turned their greatest victory into their greatest defeat. You should have stayed in your quarantine. The voice of Nexus Prime, leader of the Eternal Ones, echoed through space. Your species was contained for good reason. The universe was safe from your infection. Safe. Sarah Chen's laugh was cold and alien. You call universal extinction safe. You've consumed trillions of lives, ended countless civilizations, and turned the cosmos into a desert. We tried isolation, but you forced our hand. Now you face the consequences. The human ship, still existing in multiple states, began to move toward the Eternal One's fleet. As it did, something impossible happened. The stars began to return. Not new stars, but the same ones that had been consumed, restored to their original positions as if the void harvest had never occurred. You cannot restore what has been consumed. Nexus Prime's voice carried a note of uncertainty. The energy becomes part of us. It cannot be separated. You're right, Sarah Chen agreed. It can't be separated, but it can be transformed. You see, we learned something during our 3,000 years of isolation. We learned that consciousness isn't just a byproduct of matter and energy. It's a fundamental force of the universe. And consciousness, properly directed, can rewrite the rules. The Defiance was now directly between the Eternal Ones and the refugee fleet. The 17 harvest vessels, each capable of draining a solar system, found themselves facing a single human ship that existed in countless realities simultaneously. You will not pass, Sarah Chen said simply. This is where your harvest ends. Asterisk, the reckoning, the awakening Nexus Prime's form materialized fully in space. A being of pure energy and malevolent intelligence that had existed since the first stars formed. Its presence caused reality to bend and twist around it, creating impossible geometries that hurt to perceive. The other Eternal Ones followed suit, their combined presence turning the space between stars into a nightmare of warped physics. You dare challenge us, insects? Nexus Prime's voice resonated across dimensions. We who have devoured the dreams of gods. We who have feasted on the final thoughts of entire species. You are nothing but a memory we chose to forget, Captain. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, but she was no longer entirely human. Her consciousness had expanded beyond the boundaries of individual existence, connecting with every human who had ever lived or would live. She was both herself and something far greater, a focal point for the collective will of humanity. We are exactly what you made us, she replied, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke to the deepest levels of reality. 3,000 years ago, you consumed our world. Every human city, every child, every dream and hope, you took it all. But consciousness, true consciousness, cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. The space around the Defiance began to change. What had been empty void now sparkled with points of light, each one a human consciousness that had been absorbed by the Eternal Ones millennia ago. They were still there, still aware, still fighting from within the very beings that had consumed them. Impossible. Nexus Prime's form flickered with what might have been fear. We absorbed you completely. You became part of us. You cannot exist independently. That's where you're wrong. Sarah Chen smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and terrifying. We didn't just survive being absorbed. We learned, we grew, we became something new, and now we're going to teach you what we've discovered. The truth, revealed Dr. Kira Solthan watched the confrontation from Bastion Prime, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The laws of physics were being rewritten in real time, and the humans were doing it through will alone. Commander, she whispered to Vex, the humans aren't fighting the Eternal Ones, they're healing them. It was true. As the Defiance engaged with the harvest vessels, the dark energy that powered the Eternal Ones began to change. The malevolent force that had driven them to consume entire galaxies was being transformed into something else entirely. Creativity, curiosity, the desire to nurture rather than destroy. You see, Sarah Chen continued, her voice now speaking directly to every consciousness in the area. The Eternal Ones aren't evil, they're wounded. They're the last survivors of the universe that came before ours, and they've been trying to rebuild what they lost by consuming everything they encounter. But consumption cannot create, it can only destroy. Nexus Prime's form began to stabilize, becoming less chaotic and more recognizable as a being rather than a force of nature. You remember us as we were. We remember everything, Sarah, Chen said gently. Every species you've consumed, every world you've drained, every life you've taken, they're all still here, still conscious, still part of you. You've been carrying the weight of universal genocide for billions of years, and it's driven you insane with grief and loneliness. The revelation hit the assembled fleets like a physical blow. The Eternal Ones weren't conquerors or parasites. They were mourners, trying desperately to resurrect their lost universe by consuming the new one, not understanding that their methods were destroying the very thing they hoped to save. The probability cascade the battle, if it could be called that, entered a new phase. The Defiance began to emit waves of what the Jackarai's sensors could only describe as compressed possibility. Each wave contained thousands of potential futures, all existing simultaneously until observation collapsed them into a single reality. "This is our gift to you," Sarah Chen explained to the Eternal Ones. "We've learned to weaponize hope itself. Every human consciousness you absorbed has been working for 3,000 years to develop this technology. We call it the probability cascade." The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The Eternal Ones found themselves experiencing not just the present moment, but every possible future that could stem from their actions. They saw the universe as it could be if they chose creation over consumption, cooperation over domination. "We can show you how to bring back your lost universe," Sarah Chen continued, "not through destruction, but through creation. Every species you've consumed has been dreaming of home, adding their knowledge and culture to a vast library of consciousness. Together, we can build something new, something that honors both what was lost and what could be." Nexus Prime's form began to shift, becoming more solid and less chaotic. For the first time in eons, the ancient being felt something other than hunger and despair. "You would share your knowledge with us. After what we've done, we would share our hope," Sarah Chen corrected. "Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our weapons. It was our ability to find meaning in suffering, to create beauty from tragedy, to build something better from the ashes of what was lost. We can teach you to do the same." The new synthesis, the transformation, began with Nexus Prime. The ancient being's form stabilized completely, revealing a creature of stunning beauty and terrible sadness. Its true nature was that of a gardener, a creator of worlds, not a destroyer. The hunger that had driven it for so long was simply a corrupted version of the desire to nurture and grow. "I remember," Nexus Prime whispered, its voice now carrying wonder instead of malevolence. "I remember the first flower I ever created, the first song I ever heard. We were gardeners once, cultivators of beauty and meaning. The hunger made us forget." The other Eternal Ones followed suit, their forms shifting from instruments of destruction to beings of incredible creative potential. The harvest vessels began to transform as well, their dark energy converting into something that could nurture, rather than consume. "Now comes the hard part," Sarah Chen said. Her consciousness still expanded beyond individual existence, rebuilding what was lost. "It will take time, patience, and the cooperation of every surviving species. But it can be done." Commander Vex watched in amazement as the space around them began to fill with new possibilities. The stars that had been consumed were returning, but not as they had been. They were better, brighter, surrounded by worlds that had never existed before but felt familiar nonetheless. "How is this possible?" he asked over the communication channel. "Because consciousness is the fundamental force of the universe," Sarah Chen replied. "Matter and energy are just the tools consciousness uses to express itself. When enough conscious beings work together toward a common goal, they can rewrite the very foundations of reality." The restoration, the process of universal restoration, began immediately. The Eternal Ones, now freed from their cosmic hunger, worked alongside the human consciousness network to rebuild what had been lost. But this wasn't simple restoration, it was transformation. The new universe that emerged was richer and more complex than what had come before. Every species that had been consumed was given new life, but with the accumulated wisdom of their absorption experience, they remembered being part of something greater, and that memory drove them to work together in ways they never had before. "The universe is like a garden, Nexus Prime explained to the assembled fleet commanders. It requires constant tending, constant care. We forgot that truth and became parasites instead of gardeners. But with your help, we can remember how to nurture instead of consume. The Defiance began to phase back into normal space-time, its multiple realities collapsing into a single, stable vessel. Captain Sarah Chen's consciousness slowly returned to individual existence, though she retained her connection to the greater human collective. "This is just the beginning," she said, addressing the representatives of the surviving species. "The real work starts now. We have a universe to rebuild, and we're going to need everyone's help to do it right." The New Covenant, in the months that followed, the surviving species of the galaxy formed the New Covenant, an alliance based not on mutual defense, but on mutual creation. The Eternal Ones, now calling themselves the Gardeners, shared their ancient knowledge of cosmic cultivation, while the younger species contributed their fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to problem-solving. Humanity took on a unique role as mediators and teachers, helping other species develop their own consciousness-based technologies. The techniques that had allowed them to weaponize hope were adapted for peaceful purposes, healing trauma, accelerating evolution, and creating new forms of life that had never existed before. We learned something important during our 3,000 years of isolation. Sarah Chen explained to a gathering of the New Covenant's leaders. Suffering can be transformed into strength, but only if you choose to grow from it rather than be consumed by it. The universe has suffered greatly, but from that suffering, we can build something beautiful. The Jakari Empire, like all the survivor species, found itself transformed by the experience. Their crystal ships, once symbols of conquest and trade, became mobile gardens that spread life and beauty throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kira Sultan led the scientific efforts to understand and apply the new consciousness-based technologies, while Commander Vex became one of the New Covenant's most effective diplomats. The Eternal Garden, as the restored universe continued to grow and evolve, it became clear that something unprecedented was happening. The boundary between consciousness and reality was becoming increasingly fluid, allowing for new forms of existence that transcended the traditional categories of matter, energy, and thought. "We're not just rebuilding the universe," Nexus Prime observed during one of the regular Covenant meetings. "We're evolving it, creating something that has never existed before, a cosmos where consciousness and reality are fully integrated." The implications were staggering. Disease became optional, as conscious beings could simply choose to be healthy. Death became a temporary state, as consciousness could persist independently of physical form. Most importantly, the cycle of consumption and destruction that had driven the Eternal Ones was replaced by an endless cycle of creation and growth. "This is what we were meant to become," Sarah Chen said, her words echoing across the communications network that now connected every conscious being in the universe. Not gods, not conquerors, but gardeners, cultivators of possibility, creators of beauty and meaning. The human experiment had succeeded beyond all expectations. By weaponizing hope, by transforming suffering into strength, by choosing cooperation over competition, they had not just saved the universe, they had evolved it into something greater than it had ever been before. And in the depths of space, in the places where new stars were being born from the dreams of countless conscious beings, the universe itself seemed to smile. The harvest was over, the planting had begun, the garden would grow forever.